Great. Go ahead, Jean.
So I'm Jean Ponzi. I'm the Green Resources Manager at the Earthway Center of Missouri Botanical Garden and a member of the leadership team of BiodiverseCity St. Louis. My colleagues on the leadership team and in this initiative, Louise Bradshaw from the St. Louis Zoo and Allie Brown from the garden are also here, and we're going to do this brief presentation and then move into some discussion about what is happening in biodiversity. So the first part of it, a little bit of the history of biodiversity. This is a regional collaborative initiative. As the institution that represents the plants, the Missouri Botanical Garden has been the hub of the wheel, as I like to describe it, of the organizations that are part of this network since biodiversity was launched in 2012. And it was kind of one of those kitchen table things. The president of the Missouri Botanical Garden came to a little group of us at the garden back in 2012 and said, biodiversity initiative, make it so. And so, you know, no dowry, no money, no family background from Fiddler on the Roof. What are we going to do? Well, we looked around and saw that there were so many organizations that were dealing with biodiversity in the region. Why not bring them together in a network, work together, cross-pollinate our messages, cross-promote what we were doing, and in so doing, elevate the understanding and the protection and the engagement with biodiversity, which was not exactly a household word at that time, still isn't, but one of my goals is to make it as popular as recycling. So the three meta goals here: to enable a greater diversity of life, to not only survive, but thrive throughout our bi-state region, and to promote a culture of human engagement with the natural world around us, in our yards, on our streets, in our neighborhoods, in our parks and beyond. And then also to increase the capacity and the know-how and the willingness of our communities to practice through policy and through practice stewardship of the biodiversity resources, local lands and waters, and living communities that share this region with our human communities. And the range of participants in Biodiversity St. Louis is quite broad. It ranges from nonprofits to businesses, to government entities, to faith-based groups, schools and universities, research institutions, citizen volunteer groups, and the aggregate location home of all this is BiodiverseCitySTL.org. We spell it out with the capitalization because it's a little bit easier to read then, but it's not case sensitive if you forget which letters capitalize. And many, many partners. This is actually a early and needs to be updated list of the kinds of partners that are engaged with biodiversity. The very first event that we had was a stakeholder gathering at the Missouri Botanical Garden that was attended by representatives of about 45 different groups in our community. And I just really, it's collegial, it's collaborative, it's cooperative. We work together to understand the different organizations, what we're doing, and help cross-promote what we're doing and advance the cause that we are all supporting in various ways. Let's see. Arrows. So 1STL, relative to 1STL. Louise, I'm going to turn it over to you here because you were one of the coordinators of the formation of the target when we had our 1STL summit in 2017.
Thank you, Jean. And as for those of you who joined us at the beginning, Erin kind of walked us through a little bit of a timeline of how we got to where we are with the 1STL sustainability plan. So a group of us were voluntold, invited, all those things, to be able to pull together a working group around the topic of biodiversity. And I know, thank you, because some of the folks who've helped us along the way are actually here today. So, so thank you for being your continued passion and continued focus on this issue. At that point, we were a co-led team by Sheila Voss, formerly with the Missouri Botanical Garden, and Donna Coble when she was with Forest Relief. So we still have, representatives from Forest Relief, the Botanical Garden, obviously with Jean and Allie, Missouri Department of Conservation, and Great Rivers Greenway, and a number of other organizations who help us who are currently helping us along the way. So we came up with, out of that big sustainability planning summit in 2016, came up with the goal and clarified it a little bit in about a year past that. So around 2017, came up with the goal that you're seeing here on this slide, the very last goal. And the reason we came up with this goal of thinking of, how do we, our main question was, how do we provide opportunities for people who are managing land, who are homeowners, who manage campuses, who are making policy decisions, as Jean said, who are managing parks, recreation areas, to use biological diversity as an important criteria in making these land use planning decisions. And it really seemed the main thing that was missing was access to good data, good information. We know that East West Gateway has good information. We know Missouri Department of Conservation has good information. On the Illinois side, there's good information. We have other colleagues who are, Scott George, who's on this call, other colleagues who are contributing information all the time. So that's where we came up with this idea of an atlas. And that's something that we're really, really digging into and figuring out how to have. Thank you, Jean. Open Space Council, I knew I would forget somebody. And we have quite a few folks from the zoo involved in it. So it's a regional vision, atlas, and action plan is our overriding goal and focus. And you can see that we are all really inspired by our region's natural assets. And we want to work to make sure to elevate those and have others join us in that inspiration. Use science and data to make decisions. We also recognize that there are a large number of wonderful community stewardship groups all throughout this area. As Jean mentioned, in the history of biodiversity, 45 organizations came to the very first kickoff meeting, and there are more even now. And we know that the power of citizens and communities is undeniable, really, really strong. And we know that that's a key place to have change happen. So that's where we are. That's where we've been. And let's see. So this just gives you an idea of what the metropolitan statistical areas that East West Gateway, is including. We're focusing on the region. We recognize too that biological diversity may get interrupted by highways, but highways and county designations or state designations really are not as important as looking at the region as a living landscape. So next, I think we have our 6 categories. Here we go. So since 2017, we've really investigated what's the right tool or the right platform to have. We've settled on an Arcgis Hub. We've looked at these 6 different categories of information to be able to funnel into that hub. And this is where we are today. We're interested in getting some feedback from you about, the species inventory, biodiversity corridor, projects and plans, stories, case studies. We know that stories often are really powerful in terms of influencing change. Important and topical research finding. What are policies and practices that are really nature friendly that we want to elevate? And then a county by county inventory of groups actively stewarding these local landscapes. And we like to have this be evergreen.
And this is the focus. This is what we want to have be the focus of our discussion today. What do you know of that can populate this atlas as a great tool? It's going to have to talk to other data hubs. For example, the East West Gateway Council of Governments Ecological Data Directory that was last published in 2018. The US EPA has an, what is it? The Atlas of Biodiversity. What's the name of it? The encyclopedia? I forget. The EPA Biodiversity Motherlode. And how can this tool be used by organizations that may not have data management capacities? We discussed this with Open Space Council in our last leadership team meeting, so that an organization that has data about engagement can input that into this hub of biodiversity data. So here we are. Wanted to just our website up for a moment. A little bit of a closing thought. The image there is from City Garden downtown, which you might not think is a hotbed of biodiversity, but that is 100% native planted landscape. It just happens to be an outstanding example of the use of native plants in a very, very formal planting palette designed to complement the eclectic nature of the artwork there, and a place that people go all the time to have a blast playing in the water in the summer with LED lights shining up at them, that are completely surrounded by a real habitat of nature and human culture all in one. What a concept. So I think with that, Allie Brown, we're ready to go on to our focus groups, yes?
Yes. So the next step, I'm going to post a link to a Google form in the chat, and we are going to get into 3 different breakout groups led by Jean, Louise, and myself. I'm just going to randomly assign them. And we're going to have about 20 minutes to kind of discuss some of the questions that are in the form. So we'll be taking notes, but feel free to just fill out the form to the best of your ability with whatever information you think would be useful to populate the data for this atlas. So I'll go ahead and post that in the chat now, and then just give me 1 minute to break us out into the groups. And if there are any questions initially, now would be a great time to ask before we all disperse.
Questions? Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? At Enviro Atlas. Thank you, Erin. And this is one of a number of focus groups that the biodiversity leadership team has. We started having back in 2019. We will continue to have them to facilitate awareness of the resource that is BiomSTL, the vision, the action atlas, and the action plan. But this was a great opportunity to connect to the circles that come to a 1STL sustainability lab to get input from the diversity of your all's perspective at this convening.
I think everybody has returned from their breakout room. Oh, Erin, we're recording again.
Yeah.
All right, we're all set. Okay, Jean or Louise, do either of you want to go first and kind of share what your group discussed?
Go, Louise.
Thanks, Jean.
Louise, you've been chosen.
I think so. We did some general, well, first of all, we had a couple of people who had technical challenges. So that, I apologize for that. I wish we could have figured a way around that. So we talked a lot about biodiversity, talked about invasive species removal, talked about, the last thing we really talked about, one of the things that would be so valuable is Angie mentioned that Crestwood is going through a really neat inventory process. They've just received a grant from MDC to really look at their parks or their main park. And, a number of other municipalities are doing similar things. So how would this atlas work to connect those examples so people can learn from each other? And thank you. I mean, I think that is definitely something we'd like to see. Oh, Jan, okay. Garden clubs. So Jan is with a garden club. I can't remember the East Central District of one of the. So garden clubs are definitely an important stakeholder that we need to make sure are involved. And I know my mom was a member of 3 different garden clubs, and garden club folks are a force, absolutely a force. So thank you, Jan. Jean, Allie.
Okay, I'll go next. So let's see, points made. Ground truthing maps and presenting mapping resources in a way that they can be understood and used and be engaging for the average person. Include data, include resources from St. Louis Audubon, especially the Bring Conservation Home program. And also I would add Conservation at Home on the east side, managed by Heartlands, and from Webster Groves Nature Study Society. Catherine brought up some mapping and a bibliography and a list of resources that was developed in the earlier days of Biodiversity St. Louis, which I remember when that work happened, but I don't have access to it. It would be great to recoup that into the hopper. Engage with the municipal and the community level green teams. Could be Sustainability Commission, could be Cool Cities Committee is what they're called on the east side, which is a very strong point of connection into municipalities. Let's see. Make data accessible, promote use of this data for corporations. For example, Ameren is looking for places to invest in projects that will have a high return toward environmental justice and resiliency. Connecting to the eco-urban assessment that the Nature Conservancy did, which was on our list to do. Let's see, NASA has ARSET, A-R-S-E-T, which is a data set that has to do with biodiversity, which I'm looking forward to looking at. Engage wild ones, and need to have strong inventories that point to and exemplify areas where there is high quality nature on private and on public land. What does that look like? Why is it important? Where do you get to go see it? One of the things that's, I think, valuable is when you can see a place that is nature rich, that has high quality nature. That's a motivator, because so much of us are used to thinking that nature is grass and trees. And Allie, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Our group kind of talked about some of the questions on the form, really focusing on what biodiversity means and kind of what you think of when you think of an atlas. So some of the answers that we talked about there were really thinking about the variety of life and the different species in the ecosystem, as well as thinking about the difference between all elements of an ecosystem versus the interactions between those things in an ecosystem. So a good example that Allison brought up was the difference between a food chain and a food web. So thinking about how things are connected versus, you know, just all the things that exist. And then we talked about in an atlas, obviously thinking of maps, but you know, thinking about how we can use those maps and how searchable and easy to read they are. And then we kind of talked about how this could be useful to different groups. So one thing that we discussed was watershed planning, thinking about all the different maps or data that you're looking at when trying to describe the condition of a watershed and what would be useful in trying to determine the conditions of watersheds or ecosystems, and having the most recent and up-to-date data to make those decisions and understanding how that all works together. Another great comment that was brought up was community revitalization. There's often statements about sustainability relating to waste or energy, but there's not always statements relating to biodiversity. So thinking about water use, land use in a community revitalization lens. And then we also talked about historical habitats. So thinking about educating people on where, you know, prairie savannas, wetlands used to be in our community and in our region, and having good data to understand kind of where we came from and where we are now. So that was kind of what our group discussed. Louise, did you raise your hand?
I did, and I forgot to say something really important that Erin mentioned right as we were all coming back. That and you know, both Allie and Jean and everybody who contributed, there's so much great opportunity and possibility. And Aaron cautioned, he said, we have to be careful. Maybe we just can't do an atlas on everything. And we need to think of a wiki page. We need to think of other tools and resources to be able to use to get information out to people. Did I capture that right, Aaron? Because I think we were both coming back at the same time. So that's something that we'll just really, keep in mind, because we want whatever we put together. The most important thing is it's used and it's useful. So that's very much a part of this whole thing, is we're not just going to do one and done. We're going to make sure to really assess and evaluate how used this is and how useful it is. Thank you.
When we had the 1STL target evolving meetings back in 2017, I was in the biodiversity group. Normally, because of my long professional association, I would have been in the materials and recycling group, but no, I let myself go with the plants. However, in the intervening years, I did get involved with the materials and recycling group, specifically when we had some crises in how recycling was managed, and when we decided that we would pool our resources as a number of organizations that were advocating and educating around recycling and develop a common message that could be used to promote recycling correctly. And we now have two bodies of that. We have Recycle Responsibly, and we have Too Good to Waste, which is its younger sister, its food waste minimization cousin. So how can we look at what another topical group is doing under the umbrella of 1STL, a regional sustainability planning and implementation, and adapt methodology that has worked well? I think we're the most mapping intensive, atlas data intensive of the 6 groups, but data communicated through popular culture, I think, is a very, very important thing to maintain a process of and a methodology of, because we're trying to engage humans here that have a lot of stuff on their minds and a lot of stuff on their plates. How do we get humans to care about the nature around us and to engage with nature in our community and protect it and advocate it and have that be more of a part of our lives?
So I think we have about 10 more minutes left before the end of the lab. So I think now would be a great time to answer any questions, maybe give kind of an update. I did for my group a bit about where we're at in the development of the hub, and kind of just general overview of what we've been up to. But if there are any questions, we would love to answer them, or any comments or feedback.
Allie, I think an update for the group would be good.
Sure. Would you like me to do that?
Would you mind?
Yeah, I don't mind. So we are currently working with a fantastic intern and her advisor at Lindenwood University, and we are meeting on a kind of biweekly basis to discuss the development of the Arcgis Hub. So we have someone who can build the hub for us, but now our focus is really going to be on how to populate that hub with data, information, resources, etc. So that's really the goal of this focus group lab that we're having now, is to kind of hear how this resource could be useful to people that represent all kinds of different entities, organizations, so we're trying to figure out not only just how to create the hub, but what should be included in it. So that's kind of a brief update of where we're at right now. Jean, do you have anything to add about that?
Yes, the ESRI license, the license to develop this hub, is coming out of Missouri Botanical Gardens license with ESRI. We use ESRI tools for our living collections mapping, and Kayla Flam of the Gardens Horticulture program has been an advisor to this. So we have access to a very good, high quality license to use the technology. It's providing an exciting learning opportunity for Moira Dillo, the intern, and Tara Vansell, the instructor, because Arcgis Hub technology is still relatively new. We are building it, and we'll populate it with a very, very close and maybe even a jaundiced eye toward how are we going to maintain this. We have funding in current grants to develop it and get it up and running and get it into use. We do not have funding to maintain it. So where can we adapt methodologies of other open source data management systems? How can the gardens license allow for that, so that organizations that are generating data, again, I use the example of Open Space Council with their Community Stewardship Alliance. Another really good one would be the community engagement of Eco Crew on South Grand that you run, Angie Weber. Where there are organizations that are generating data that can add into this, how do we create this atlas so that it is accessible to update, and then we'll structure the process of vetting and being a good gatekeeper so that it is good quality data as time goes on.
Jean, I just wanted to mention it. I haven't gotten very far with it, but Patty Hagan at TREX keeps asking about how she could get TREX involved, particularly with their new Geospatial Innovation Center. She's really looking for ways to get tied into the sustainability community with her new geospatial and GIS expertise in TREX. And I'm looking at their website, and they have like active learning and extended reality and simulation lab. And I'm like, wow, let's simulate what neighborhoods could look like with healthy biodiversity in them, and really give people, you know, I guess a human's eye view of what their neighborhoods could be, you know, with healthy biodiversity. That would be cool. So I will update the group once I talk more with Patty.
I would like to get a date to make this presentation, or a version of this presentation, to the TREX community, so that we can let them know in a focused way, and then have a dialogue that is appropriate for that community. And let's do it.
Cool.
Yay. We've got a bunch of really interesting intros going on in the chat in the next few minutes. I'm wondering if everyone can put in their name and what organization they represent. So yay, Bridget and Lois and Jennifer. Yay, yay, yay. Oh my gosh. Jennifer says Heartlands is hiring. So you know anybody who wants a career in sustainability and biodiversity, I guess, go for it.
Land conservation and water programs manager and communications. Come on over.
All of it. And you get to
That's all one job.
No, that's 2 full-time and 1 part-time. The communications is part-time. The other 2 are full.
I was gonna say that's a lot.
and you get to work with Jennifer. How cool is that?
I can promise the maps will be good.
Heartlands was very fortunate to get you, Jennifer. And we had a direct connection to Heartlands for a while with a representative of the Heartlands staff on our leadership team. And then that staffing changed, and we'd really like to reconnect that again. Heartlands was a big part of dialogue in the more developmental years of biodiversity, in the earlier years of biodiversity.
Well, if we get staffed up, maybe we can go back to being everywhere at once.
Or at least everywhere on Zoom.
Yeah.
And yes, Angie, we got your message earlier, and thank you for reaching back out about reconnecting into the work that's going on here.
Well, we've got a lot of really great interest and really great resources. Yeah, I hope everyone has a chance to let us know who you are. We, and keep in touch and let us know how we can work together. If you haven't figured that out already.
The goes around comes around nature of this kind of work, of ecological work, and of the collegiality and the relational circles in this community are just so evident, and such a wealth of what's happening here. In the earlier days of biodiversity, you referred to urban vitality and ecology Catherine Warner earlier in the conversation. The Green City Coalition, which is in the College Hill, Walnut Park, and I forget what the third neighborhood is in the city. That has been a connection that has come back around again through Trenton Ellis, who heads that and who is part of the St. Louis Economic Development Corporation. Research projects that are focusing in biodiversity. The St. Louis Green Business Challenge that has had a biodiversity component since 2013 that's due to be updated, especially engaging the work of the cities, of the communities. Projects like yours in your neighborhood, Michael Wallstetter, that was profiled in a presentation about Homegrown National Park, which is a Doug Tallamy word for using our personal property to reinvigorate biodiversity. There is so much of that. And one of the great strengths I see that Biome STL can do is help tell those stories and make that mass of diverse action more visible and better able to interconnect and interrelate as we go along.
Yeah, I wanted to plug something Catherine mentioned earlier, and we're still a couple months away, but the City Nature Challenge, how I want to say important it is for this group in the region to do that. It's not till April, but we send out notices to get people out into their communities or into other areas or parks to use the iNaturalist app to record biodiversity in the region. And it's in the past years, it's been a competition to see how many observations we can get, compared to other cities and other regions. But it's important for us because we want that data. Our researchers in the area want that data, and they use that data to do projects and to do research. So please keep an eye out for the City Nature Challenge and those notices when they'll come. I guess notices will start in March for the challenge in April, or is it first weekend?
Yeah, I put a link in the chat to our newsletter. We'll definitely send out a reminder before the City Nature Challenge in April. I can confirm that we're signed up. I'm going to be the organizer for the the St. Louis region again this year. So I've went ahead and registered us with the global challenge, but our website, the Biodiversity St. Louis website, will have some information. Catherine's website on the City of St. Louis Sustainability website will also probably still also has information from last year if you're interested in some of that data and information. But we'll be sure to send out a reminder through our newsletter, and the link to that is in the chat if you want to receive that. And thank you to everybody for filling out the form. I'm just kind of glancing through it now. It looks like we've got a lot of great responses, and that's really going to help us to figure out how to do this thing. So I appreciate that.
Should I stop recording?
I think